Have you ever wondered if that favorite brush that you have on Procreate, if you could actually use it with tapering? Or quite the opposite, if you do have a favorite brush in Procreate, but you actually would like it to use without tapering, just a nice texturing brush. Have you ever had a texture file that you wish you could create it as a texture brush? Or how about creating some high quality brushes in Procreate, and what are those settings in order to get there? Plus adding color variants to your brushes, or even combining brushes for some really nice and unexpected results. How about having brushes with blend modes right from the get-go? Or inverting sources, inverting grain sources for creating different effects? Well, that and more we're going to be covering in this video. This is going to be my top 10 tips and tricks for Procreate's Brush Studio. So this is a video that you definitely don't want to miss. My name is Lei when you're watching Ghost Papers, so now let's get to it. Alright, so tip number 1, starting off this list, let's take a look on how to add and, if necessary, remove pressure tapering to brushes in Procreate. Alright, so tip number 1, let's just say that you've been using a certain brush. In this example here, I'm going to be using one of my neon brushes with the package that I'll leave in the description of this video. And I'm going to be using one that doesn't have tapering. So the exercise here is to apply tapering. We can also take off tapering, and I'll show you this after. So first, we're just going to be applying tapering. So let's just say that you have a brush that you would really like to keep using, but you would like to use with tapering. The very first thing that we want to do is make a duplicate of our brush, because in the case that it doesn't have a saved state or a saved place where it can go back to its original settings, it's always best to make duplicates of your brush so you don't lose the originals. Now I'm just going to tap on the on our duplicate, and as you can see, we have a very kind of studio pan monoline brush with no pressure settings, no tapering. So if I draw, and I'm trying to be now as careful as I can, I get no tapering applied to it. So let's just clear the drawing pad, make one single stroke so we can really see what we're dealing with here. So you would think that, for example, to add tapering, you would just go into the taper section and add pressure taper. You could even link it so that the tip sizes are the same. And now if you were to draw, you're still not getting much. Now you can evolve this, you can keep going, and now dial in the size and pressure. And even if you do it at max, let's see what happens once we're drawing. So I'm trying to be really careful, trying to get some pressure sensitivity, and I'm still not getting much. In fact, I'm only getting something at the very tail end of our brush, a little bit at the beginning, but you know, we really want to get more of a smooth kind of finish, and that's only happening at the end. What's even more puzzling is that if we go here to the bottom settings of the tapering and I turn on classic taper, I now get the inverted result of the brush we had just done. So either I get the tapering at the end of our brush or of our stroke, or I get it at the beginning. So what is the actual way to get some really nice pressure sensitivity brush in the settings of the Procreate's Brush Studio? Well, we're going to turn off classic taper. We're actually going to turn off tip sizes, and we're going to remove pressure tapering from the very top here as well. And the secret really lives in two places. One, it's going to be the Apple Pencil setting, and now on pressure, we're just going to leave it at max for now. And the second thing, we have to go into properties, and we need to make sure that our minimum size is set to none, or 0, or as lowest as it can be. So now when I draw, I'm going really careful here, and then very strong on the canvas, and then back to being really subtle, you can definitely see that the brush has tapering on both ends. So I'm going to clear the drawing pad and do one more once again, and here's a much better result. So now if I hit done, you can definitely see from the thumbnail that now we have a brush with tapering applied to both ends. So now when I draw, be very careful on the canvas, and now really strong, and then back, you see that it has some really nice tapering on both ends. So now for those of you looking to remove tapering from a certain brush, well, I'm just going to show you the backwards way, or like how to, disable it. But basically going back into our just created brush, first thing here, minimum size, leave it to the place or the number that you're most comfortable with. You don't really have to worry too much about this. Basically, these two dials here, they're actually just related to this slider right here. So it's basically saying how much minimum is the lowest setting here, and how much of a maximum size is once we dial this to the maximum on the slider outside the brush studio, if that makes sense. So let's just go back into our create a brush here. So really don't have to worry too much about this setting, but back in Apple Pencil, we're going to zero out the size, and then back into taper, we're just going to zero out size and pressure, just to make sure that you have now back into a brush that doesn't have tapering applied to any of its beginning or the end of the stroke. Tip number 2, how to create brushes with your favorite texture images. Now moving on to tip number 2, and let's just say that we have this image, this really cool kind of stone textural image, and we would like to create a custom brush that uses this image as a grain source. So basically creating a custom textural brush in Procreate. So you've taken a photo of this texture, you've treated in Photoshop or even Procreate itself, because by the way, Procreate will only accept or work with black and white images for creating these brushes. The color comes from the color that you set these brushes to, or color variations that you can add in the settings of Brush Studio. That being said, back to this image right here, let's just say that we want to use this image in order to create a really cool kind of crafted look to our digital illustrations. As we know, digital illustrations can look quite flat, so adding little bits of grain, little bits of textural work makes it look really crafted, makes it look like really interesting. So I'm just going to click on that little arrow, the export arrow of the the Apple the iPad OS. We're going to copy that photo, and I'm going to go back into Procreate, hit the Brush Studio, and now the plus to create a new brush. So the Brush Studio comes with several sub-tabs or subfolders, and we're not going to go too deep into those. I'm just basically tackling each note here, each item in the top 10 tips, so that I can give you the best overview of all of these tips. So the two things that we're going to do here, first on the shape, as you create a new brush, you're given two very simple bare bone settings here. You're giving a shape source that is just a circle. It doesn't have any feathering in the circle, so that is one of the first things that we're going to do. We're going to hit edit, import, and we're going to go into the shape library or the source library. And as you can see, we have grain sources and shape sources. Because we're changing the shape, we want to keep here. And we're going to be choosing the medium one, which comes with a little bit of feathering. And that's exactly what we want. So we're now going to go on to the grain source. Actually, sorry, I do need to press or hit OK here. So we're just going to go make sure it's medium, and then I'm going to hit done. And now we're going to go into the grain source. So now onto the grain source, we're also going to hit edit. And if you still remember, we've copied that photo onto the memory of the iPad. So now all we have to do is import and then paste. And as you can see, we now have our shape imported into the grain editor, imported into Procreate. Now we can do two things here. We can leave it as is. We can just hit done and use this image as is, or we can tap on auto repeat and get a much bigger, much more detailed kind of a texture, which will help us, especially for drawing in high quality canvases, anything over 2K or even anything over 4K. This really helps you out in order to cover an image with a better source that doesn't look pixelated. And you have the grayscale, and all of these settings are really just trying to make sure that you get the best kind of borders, because this photo wasn't really made as a tileable texture, meaning that the sides, top and bottom, they all match if you're pasting multiple copies on sides and on a vertical sense as well. But by using the auto repeat tool here on Procreate, it gives you the best tools in order to be able to create a tileable texture. So I'm just gonna hit done, and it's creating the texture. And now we have our shape source, which has a little bit of feathering, and we also have our grain. And I'm just going to scale this quite a bit so we can start seeing how it's like picking up. And I'll see if there's a little bit of contrast, because I know that this grain source didn't have a lot of contrast. That was the only thing about this image, but really I'm just trying to show you an example here. And now when I draw, I definitely have a really cool texture going on this brush. So now if I hit done and just choosing this color blue, I'm just going to actually go back into the brush here and onto properties. That's the last thing that I want to show you. If you're really trying to make a brush that's covering a large area, you should just increase the size here, because that's a bit of a different brush. You're not really looking to paint fine details or like little edges, but basically you're trying to cover something with a textural effect. So you can really just scale up maximum size. I'm just going to put 500 and I'm just going to hit done. Now when I paint this, I'm covering a very large area with some really interesting grain effects. So quickly, to just show you what this can do onto an illustration, I'm just going to open one of my latest illustrations, this one, and I'm going to create a new layer. Now I'm going to set this to black, for example. Make on this layer, in this new layer, I'm just going to set this to overlay. And now I'm going to paint our illustration with this brush that I just created. And what overlay actually does, it reads the black and white values and kind of like burns the image, burns the colors a little bit, so they become extra vivid or like even more intense, hotter in that sense. And as you can see, because we've created that from a photo, there's these like little white speckles that are coming from the the alpha of that grain source, and it's actually creating a very interesting effect, such as there's a little bit of a crafting kind of involved into this brush. And I will also leave in the link in the description of this video the whole series of brushes that I've created, starting with wood and all different textures, going to stones, textiles, and much more. And all of these brushes are high quality brushes that I've created for this very purpose. So to give you an example on just using a textile, that I'm just gonna set it to normal, it has this really cool effect, as you can see here. And if I were to just tap on the blend mode and set this to overlay, now it looks like this illustration was kind of painted on a canvas. And I hope that the the camera is able to pick that. So maybe I'm just gonna turn down the brightness of my iPad a little bit so that you can definitely see the texturing work a little bit better. So those texture brushes, they can be really helpful and useful if you're trying to create something that needs to have a little bit more of a crafted look to your illustrations. Now, tip number 3, some of the settings for creating high quality brushes in Procreate. All right, now on to the topic of creating high quality brushes in Procreate. So there's definitely a few settings that you do want to know and you do want to be able to tweak them. And once again, I will also leave in the description of this video my third brush set, and this one is a completely free brush set that I've left in many of my videos in the description of my videos. These are the two brushes. One has pen pressure and does a really nice job that you can use to do your ink lines or to work with some really cool like action lines that need to have different strokes and different widths, and as well as a studio pen or monoline that has no pressure applied. So how do you create these two brushes and how do you make sure that they are high quality brushes? So the very few things that you do want to know here heading into Brush Studio is make sure that once you go into shape, that you have at the very bottom, you have some shape filtering options. Make sure that is always at improved filtering. When you're looking at your shape source itself, try to work with at least a 2048 by 2048 shape source picture. I could even suggest that you can even go at a 4K, for example, picture here, but do not try to feed into the Brush Studio pictures that are, for example, too small, like 56 by 56 or 128 by 128 pixels. Try to go with some really, as big as possible without going, I wouldn't go over 8K, for example, but I would say that at least 4K would definitely generate better results. And the same goes for your grain source. Try to go with at least 2048 by 2048. This is not in the rule books of any Procreate manual that I've ever read, but I would just, for just keeping safe, I would definitely go with a higher source and a higher grain source than using low quality images or feeding low quality images to the brush source, to the shape source and to the grain source here in the Brush Studio. And the last thing, As I've showed you that at the bottom of shave source, there is improved filtering. The same happens with grain source. Also make sure that improved filtering is also marked for this one. Tip number 4, adding randomness of color variation to your brushes. So now on to the next question here, which is how do we add some really nice colors to our strokes here in Procreate without we having to go onto the color picker and doing anything really, like using multiple colors, using clipping masks or layer masks in order to reveal any colorful layers underneath our strokes. So we're going to use this studio pen that I've created for free here as an example. And the secret to create these colorful brushes is really here in the color dynamics section. And we're going to be changing two things. First is the color jitter. We're gonna go up on the hue and saturation. And just so you guys know, the longer, the higher this number here, it means that you're gonna be using a bigger hue. So you're gonna be using more colors. So if I start drawing here, you see that I'm actually going through all of the hues in the color wheel per se. And now if I keep it to 14%, for example, I'd be dealing with most of the reds and oranges. So by having this at max, I'm using all of the, the maximum capacity of the hue kind of circle. Now the same goes here. We can also do the same with color pressure. And that's where it really starts to get interesting. You start getting this really, really cool kind of a gradient as you go through your strokes. So we're gonna add a little bit of secondary color pressure as well. So I'm just gonna clear the drawing pad. As we can see, as we can really feel like how cool this line looks. And now when I hit done, this is basically the secret. However, as you can see, you do need to be using a color, any color, for this trick to work. If you just use black, it just doesn't work because it has nothing to work with. And if you go all the way to white, it still works. It's just because black is the absence of color. So really Procreate doesn't have anything in order to be able to work with, in order to be able to add these colors to. And because we've created with a hue at 100%, every stroke that you draw here on the canvas will give you a different result. The last catch about creating brushes that are colorful as these ones is that make sure that you go into the actions menu and then go into preferences and then hit edit pressure curve. Now, if your pressure curve is anything like this at the very top, and I've had this problem myself and I couldn't even understand why was this happening, it's not gonna work. All of a sudden, when I paint, I get this full colorful line. There's no gradation, there's no gradient happening here. So make sure that once you go into a pressure curve, just hit reset and you should be good to go. You'll see that the colors, the gradients inside the strokes are back. Tip number 5, getting creative out there, which is combining existing brushes to create some really new and unexpected effects. Okay, so for this one right here, guys, I'm going to give you a brief showing of what a combined brush experience can actually lead you to. And I think, it's just going to be showing you a little bit of what it can be done. And then it's going to be up to you to try different combinations, different settings, and try to find different results, really unexpected results that you can get by combining two brushes from the existing library of brushes that exists in Procreate 5. So for this example right here, we're going to be mixing up the Kunani brush, I believe that's how it's pronounced, with the Odeon one. And first, I just want to show you what both brushes actually look like. So that is the first one, and the Odeon one looks like this. So although I'm using the same color, you can definitely see that they have different appearances. So they actually behave differently once you paint them over the same color canvas. So as I said many times, I always make duplicates of your brushes before kind of playing around with them. So I'm just gonna made a duplicate of both, and I'm just gonna move Odeon on top of Kunani, and I'm gonna select both and press combine. So now I have this brush, which for now is just named as Odeon 1. This is basically how Procreate actually names brushes. It usually just adds a 1 after the title if the name already exists. And now we can see that we have both brushes, each one with its own kind of settings that we can find here on these subfolders. And you can definitely play around with all of them. But really one of the most interesting things here, other than already what it looks like here, already looks like the blending of two brushes in a super cool way. So we're basically getting the waviness from the Odeon on top of a very kind of artistic brush, such as the Kunani. Now I'm gonna select for the first one, I'm just gonna go here on the combine mode. Basically, what is the blend mode that will combine these two brushes? Right now it's set to normal, but I'm gonna set to overlay. And if I scroll here, you can definitely see all the different modes and all the different kind of appearances that this brush has. And even the dark one looks already super cool. But for now, let's just leave it on overlay because it's actually picking up a little bit of both here. I'm gonna hit done. And now if, looking at the result that we used to have here at the top, I'm just gonna increase this brush a little bit. Now we have a little bit of the Odeon brush with the first one, with this really cool and artistic brush. So now we have a brush that actually, if you paint it several times here, it's this really kind of bright, almost like additive kind of brush, which almost like reminds us of light, painting with light. And I'm just going to clear the layer once again so you guys can really see. It's also pressure sensitive. So as I'm pressing on the canvas, it gets brighter, and as I go a little bit less, it actually goes between the two brushes. It's a really cool effect. Right off the bat here, we have this really cool brush that we can play around and actually create many different illustrations. The possibilities are almost endless here because of the the combinations that you can get by combining brushes on Procreate and changing its settings. Tip number 6, and this may come in handy, is setting up learning how to create a brush with a fixed size so you never have to worry anymore about its brush size settings. Next one is creating a brush with a fixed size. So this may just be like a curiosity or something that you may actually need once in a while, but I definitely use that once I actually created my pixel art brushes, because these are very specific. As you can see here, the brushes are supposed to be 2 pixels, 1 pixel, 6 pixels, and sometimes you may actually get into a project where you're going to need to have brushes that don't change in size. And what I mean by that is that going to my studio pen, if I draw with the maximum size, I get this much of the stroke width, and if I put it on minimum size, I get a very different result. So let's just say that I'm creating an illustration and I'm using this about like 12% brush and I'm making everything at 12%, but for some reason I walk away from this illustration, time passes, maybe a month or 2 passes, and once I come back, I can't really find, and I've been tweaking this dial and I can't really find the number that I was using before, the 14% here. So in order to avoid this, all you have to do as a setup, so you have to do this beforehand, all we have to do is go into the properties and make sure that the maximum size is set to 14%, as well as the minimum size. So now you have both sizes, minimum and maximum, at 14%. And now when I tap done, I can draw this brush at this dial, let's say like maximum size. You see that I'm still getting the same result here. And if I put it at minimum size, look at this, I'm still getting the same brush size. So this actually may come very handy if you're doing an illustration. Say that, for example, you're like inking a comic book drawing and you want to make sure that your strokes are pretty much the same, or if you're doing something that kind of looks like vector work in Procreate and you want to make sure that the width of your strokes is pretty much the same, just make sure to tweak these settings. Tip number 7, this is great for markers, watercolor brushes, is learning how to set up brushes so they have internal blending modes from the get-go. So your layer can be set to normal, but the brushes themselves have this really amazing quality of just being able to layer brush strokes on top of each other because they have internal blend modes. The next one is using brushes that have blending mode from itself, from the get-go. So what does that actually mean? So for example, say that we have a layer here, it's set to normal blending mode at 100% opacity. So it's a very default kind of layer here in Procreate. Using my Studio Pen brush, I'm just going to increase the size and show you again which brush that I'm using. And if I paint this with my blue color, kind of a blue cobalt color, I'm getting a very normal result on a normal blending mode layer. So I'm even going to dial this to maximum so that you can see the result that I want to show you. Now, there is a package of brushes that I've been working on, and it's not fully finished, but they are marker brushes. And marker brushes, the alcohol-based markers, they have this characteristic that they are supposed to be able to, you're painting once. Let me actually increase the size here as big as I can because I really want to be able to show you this. You paint once and you can see that, has this really nice characteristics as you're like painting on paper. But if you were to use alcohol-based markers in the real world and paint it on top of an existing stroke, you would get this effect, this multiplying ink effect. As you can see here, you see that on every stroke, the color is just getting darker and darker and darker as kind of like the addition of multiple passes of this ink onto the paper. So how do we actually achieve this if the layer is set to normal? How are we getting this really nice result? Well, that is because in the brush itself, once we go into rendering, we have two options actually here selected, which are really important. One is that we want to make sure that these brushes set to intense glaze. And the next thing, as you can see, the blend mode is set to multiply. You can set it to, all the blend modes that Procreate actually gives you. But if you set it to multiply, and I've also set it the burnt edges mode to multiply, I'm not really sure if I needed that, but by setting this to multiply, I'm getting the multiply blend mode already from the get-go on this specific brush, on a layer that can be on any blend mode. But what's important here is that the blend mode is actually coming from the brushes themselves. So this may also really come in handy if you have a need, if you need to paint your illustration with brushes that should be looking more like watercolor, for example, or alcohol-based markers. Tip number 8, and that's just a quick one, which is inverting sources. So let's just cover quickly this one. Some of you may actually know about it, some of you may not know about it, but basically using an example on a white canvas here, we're going to go back into one of my created brush sets, and we're going to be using the wood ones and the 06 version. And if I paint on a white canvas with a black color, I'm just going to fill up this canvas here, you see this really cool kind of a wood texture effect. But as you can see, as we zoom in and we see the really cool, nice details about this texture, we see that the wood grains themselves, they look white, whereas the background looks kind of grayish or dark. So when we're painting this brush on a white or bright color canvas, it's not really making a lot of sense. It almost looks like what we need is the inverted version of this. And don't worry, because in the brush pack itself, I am providing the inverted versions, as you can see here, and the normal versions for most of the brushes. But I just want to show you in the case that you have a similar brush on your side and you just want to know how you can make this better, how you can invert grains or sources. So all that we have to do, we're going to be selecting our little wood 06 here, and on the grain source, we're going to tap on edit, and now by just double tapping on the source itself, I am inverting it. So now going back into the illustration, if I were to now paint this, now we're getting the desired result, which we're getting the veins of the wood, we're getting it black, and the background is actually white or bright. So this is why when I've made this brush pack, I've made it in a way that we have the inverted versions and also the normal versions, so that I'm just going to create a new layer here and drop a dark blue, for example. Now if I create a new layer and choose, for example, this yellow, if I paint with the inverted version, now I am getting the veins, of the wood kind of showing, and the background's a little dark. But if I paint with the normal version, now I get all of the detail of the wood. So on a dark background, I actually get the desired result. This is a result that I want. If I am painting on a white kind of background, I definitely want to invert my source. So in order to invert your sources, just go into the brush itself, go into the grain, edit, double tap in order to invert them. Tip number 9 is how to create a brush that feels like it's running out of ink. The next one is something that is also kind of cool, the effect itself. It's how to create a brush that feels like we're running out of ink. So how do we create this effect, and what is this effect? Well, back in the old days, you would have a pen that you would have to actually dip onto an ink reservoir, and then you would be drawing, and all of a sudden you'll be running out of ink and you have to go again and keep writing your letter or drawing or anything that you're making. But here in this brush, it's a really cool brush, has pen pressure, but it looks like it never runs out of ink. So how do we create a similar effect? Well, we're going to go into the Brush Studio, and back here in Brush Studio we're going to be using the Apple Pencil subsetting, and all that we have to choose here or to dial down is the flow. We're going to be using this and putting this all the way to the bottom. So now when I really draw, I'm getting it's actually connected to pressure, but I get the running out of ink with pressure. So if I do opacity, do I get it? No. But I am getting with pressure, and that's what I am going to be showing you guys. So now if I'm drawing and if I apply pressure to it, I get this really cool effect. And I can get it as soon as I want to, or I can run for a bit and then get this effect. So this can be really cool. Once again, let me just erase, kind of clear this layer so you can see some strokes. This could be really cool if you're doing an illustration that needs to have that feel that you're running out of ink. So again, watercolors, brushes, oil paints, anything that looks like paint. Maybe not necessarily this brush is the best example, but I just wanted to show you the most clear example here on what this effect looks like. And if you need to create illustrations where you need to have this sensibility, that little option, flow, is the one to go on how to create this effect. Tip number 10, which is really great if you're creating your own brushes, or if you want to make sure that the brushes you've downloaded, you have a backup of the state of its original settings, which basically, so this tip is about how to save states for your favorite brushes. All right, the next one can be also quite helpful, especially if you are changing settings on your brushes, if you're playing around with your brushes. And even though, as I've showed you here in this video, you can duplicate your brushes, it's always good to have fail-safe backups. So how do we create this idea, which is called the save states? So head into your brush, and let's just say that you're really happy with the choices you've made here with all of the settings you've been playing around with this brush, and you don't want to have the chance of losing those. So all you have to do, go into the About This Brush, and as you can see, you can add a picture, you can sign it, but there's this option here, create a new reset point. And now it asks you a question, do you really want to create a new reset point? This cannot be undone. I'm going to hit save, and now I have a reset point. So I can tweak settings here, I can move these dials all the way, I can do whatever I want, and I can always go back here and just tap to reset the brush state or where I saved it. It's a very helpful option that not a lot of people actually might know of. Tip number 11, this is more of a reminder, which is to duplicate your brushes before making any experimentations with them. And the last one, guys, really always as a bonus one, at the same time as you have saved states, you can always, and you should always, duplicate your brushes as you're changing settings or trying things out. Do not go about changing original brushes and changing things, because they may actually require you to go and reset your brushes, or like reset the whole Procreate. And if you have saved illustrations, it might be a bit of a headache. You may have to download your illustrations or put them in a certain backup so that you can restore everything back to its original form. So make sure that you're duplicating brushes before playing around with these brushes or these settings. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed, and if you did, a like would be super appreciated, as well as make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell notification icon so you don't miss any of these tips and tricks, reviews, and speed paint videos. And that is all for you to become a better digital illustrator. Now on the right side of the screen, there's more content for you guys to watch. One is my latest upload, and the other one is a video that YouTube is actually recommending you to watch to also expand your skills. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.